United Kingdom, Netherlands.
And the Netherlands coffee shop is a special designation where marijuana can be sold. When you visit and hear from the owner,
He was the places where not whiskies and growth, particularly Mr. High.
I know our people are very helpful with the idea of the Jewish presence. And every time I go, I wonder, how can this be? What does this mean? What's the use of people who live there?
From pyramids, from the antiquity of ancient Near East and Egypt, all the way right up through contemporary art. Berlin has it all, and it has the first quality.
These trips are literally once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to go to interesting places with experts who not only have passion for the subject and location, but can get you into places you generally wouldn't be able to in America.
How has our understanding of the universe been changed by the data from these telescopes and other telescopes around the world?
I'm going to be really interested to go into the Jewish synagogues to see what is it like when Soviet immigrants come together with the descendants of Polish residents who were there before the war.
All the history that's there is layered, layer upon layer, architecturally, in the very fabric of the streets and blocks. That's what we're going to try to get the people to experience.
Spaces for these programs are limited. Reserve your spot today.
All right, that was good timing. Let me turn this on. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Please be patient as some other folks are still finding their way in. So you'll have to let me chew up some time as they struggle with the snow and the parking. Welcome to our official spring semester kickoff, though clearly it does not look like the spring outside. Somehow in the academic world, we start the spring in January, so that's what we do. Tonight, a special treat featuring NASA astronaut Michael Foreman, and also a special welcome to anyone watching us via YouTube. This is our first foray into live streaming our distinguished lectures in the lifelong learning program, and they'll also be available for later viewing. So we want to offer a special thank you and welcome to Dr. Michael Heil, front, who is the president and CEO of the Ohio Aerospace Institute, for joining us. As many of you know, Case Western Reserve University is a proud member of OAI's network, and we're happy that he is here with us this evening. I also want to thank the university's Deputy Provost, Dr. Lynn Singer, representing the University Administration, and we are always grateful for Lynn's enthusiastic commitment to the lifelong learning program, so thank you for everything you do. Before we begin tonight's program, I do want to take the opportunity to call out a number of upcoming activities, both here in our Beechwood facility and around Greater Cleveland. Some of you might have seen the list of our distinguished lecturers on the postcards that are out in front. These will begin tonight, but continue on February 9th with Chaim Watzman, who will be talking about Israel's upcoming elections. February 18th, we are pleased to welcome back to Cleveland Scott Cowan, the retired president of Tulane and former dean at Case Western Reserve University. March 18th, we will be welcoming the editor of the Forward newspaper, Jane Eisner. And March 25th, we welcome back to Cleveland Israeli author Etgar Keret. And those are just some of our distinguished lectures that will be here in the facility in Beechwood. We also have a number of dinner lecture programs coming up in the next few weeks. Our Origin Science Scholars Lectures in Beechwood kicks off on Monday. Any of you who may happen to be Westsiders, with that program actually will be debuting in Parma tomorrow evening at the Parma branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. February 16th, we have a dinner lecture with Professor Jeffrey Ulam, who will be presenting a history of the Cleveland Playhouse, and our Tzion lecture series returns February 9th, and that again is the Chaim Watzman on Israel's upcoming elections. And of course, we have a number of our full semester mini courses beginning in the next couple of weeks. There's still a few spaces left in our Spring Senior Scholars series. We have a number of courses beginning here in Beechwood, including a new Jewish boot camp series and other offerings around town. Please check out our website for all of the latest updates. We're constantly adding things, and sometimes dates get changed, so that's the best way to know what we have going on. And finally, I would like to plug our travel programs. Those of you who've been sitting out there for a while saw what we're up to. These are offered in conjunction with the Alumni Association of Case Western Reserve University, as we are pleased to offer educational travel with Case Western Reserve University faculty. This is our first season developing this program, so in order to kick it off robustly, we've actually decided to discount our listed fees. If you're interested in this program, please contact our office by phone or email if you have any questions. So now I will give a formal introduction to our featured speaker. NASA astronaut and retired U.S. Navy Captain Mike Foreman is a veteran of 2 space flights. He was selected as an astronaut by NASA in June 1998, flew aboard STS-123 in March 2008 and STS-129 in November 2009. He has logged more than 637 hours in space, and that certainly sounds like a lot, including 32 hours and 19 minutes during 5 spacewalks. Currently, he serves as the Safety Branch Chief at NASA Johnson Space Center. He is an Ohio native who received a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the United States Naval Academy in 1979 and a Master of Science in Aeronautical Engineering from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School in 1986. Please join me in welcoming astronaut Mike Foreman.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be back in Ohio. Like Brian said, I am a native. My mother still lives down in Wadsworth, the same town I grew up in. She's not here right now because she's in Florida. So I'm not sure why I get so many invitations to come back to Ohio between November and February, but I get a lot of them. This is not really the time of year I relish coming back, but it is good to be back. Invite me back in September, August, September, when it's 110 degrees in Houston and it's pleasant here. So think about that, Brian. I know And thank you also for explaining the spring semester kickoff, because it was billed to me as the spring kickoff, and I was trying to put that together in my mind, you know, how you could consider this the spring kickoff. Spring comes a little bit later in Houston. And I also want to thank Michelle Miller. Michelle didn't get any credit so far here in the presentation, but maybe it'll be blamed later, depending on how this goes. But Michelle did a lot of the grunt work, I know, and getting an astronaut to come and speak at an organization, there's a lot of red tape involved, and Michelle waded through all that, and I thank you for putting up with all that. I apologize for it, but it's sort of a necessary evil for us. But also, from Michelle's correspondence, you know, I got a little bit worried because she said, Mike, this will be the most intelligent group you will ever speak to. I think that the implication was, Mike, you need to up your game a little bit. So I will do my best to up my game. Like Brian also said, I've been on 2 space shuttle missions. I'd like to start off showing you a video from STS-129, my last space shuttle mission. That'll kind of set the tone here in a second. First, I'll introduce you to my crewmates on STS-129, because during the course of this video, I don't have time to talk a lot about the people that you're seeing. So if you've got a little bit of an introduction, you'll know who I'm talking about a little bit. So I'll do that, and then I'll show you this video. I'll go through some slides to try to up my game and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with your tax dollars at NASA and some of the benefits that we're getting out of our science experiments and our work. And then hopefully at the end we'll have plenty of time for questions, because to me, I always enjoy the question and answer part of these presentations much more than, you know, this will be about the 250th time I've shown somebody this 10-minute video. So, you know, that part of it is always the same for me. I like watching the video, but it's the same to me. So the questions are always different, you know, and you think you know something until a first grader asks you a question, you know, and then you realize you don't really know as much as you thought you knew. So let me start off. This is our crew picture. This is our official crew picture from STS-129. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to try to work the laser pointer here. There we go. This guy right here, Charlie Hobaugh, he was the commander of our mission. We call him Scorch, Marine fighter pilot, Harrier pilot actually. So you'll see him in the video. In my background, I went to the Navy Test Pilot School, and I was an instructor at the Navy Test Pilot School for a couple of years, which was the second best job I ever had, because test pilot schools, first off, if you like being a pilot, you'll love being a test pilot. And at the Navy Test Pilot School, we had about 16 different kinds of airplanes and helicopters. And as an instructor, you got to fly just about anything you wanted to fly there. You could be flying a glider in the morning, F-18 fighter jet in the afternoon, so it was a lot of fun. So I spent 2 years there. 2 of my students at Test Pilot School were Charlie Hobaugh, my commander, and Butch Wilmore, Captain Barry Wilmore, a Navy fighter pilot, our pilot. So again, in NASA lingo, we don't have pilot and co-pilot, we have commander and pilot. So think of Scorch as our pilot, and Butch, we call him Butch, our co-pilot, okay? And so Scorch is the guy actually flying the space shuttle. Butch is the guy actually pushing the button to make the landing gear come down at the end, and you know, that's about it. But in the hierarchical you know, thing about the mission, this is our boss, and this is his second in command. So these 2 guys were knucklehead students of mine at the Test Pilot School at one time. So, you know, of course, as teachers, some of the teachers in the audience, you learn that, you know, you need to treat everybody nicely, because you don't know who will end up being your boss later in life. So those 2 guys, this Butch, he's an F-18 fighter pilot, Navy guy. He's up on the space station right now. So he's one of the 6 inhabitants of the International Space Station today, right now. Talked to him on a telephone Saturday. He called me at my house, you know, which is nice, because the space station has a phone, and those guys can just call you, you know, on your cell phone at any time and bother you while you're trying to do stuff. But anyway, it's kind of cool to see Butch up there in space. This was Butch's first mission, STS-129, and now his second mission. He's spending 6 months on the space station right now. So those 2 guys. Then you have the rest of the 4 are mission specialists. So in the shuttle lingo, I was a mission specialist. Don't ask me what my specialty is, because they didn't tell me yet, but I did a lot of spacewalks, so I would fall back on that and say maybe I'm a mission specialist spacewalker. But anyway, let me start with Leland Melvin. Leland Melvin is a good friend of mine. We started in the astronaut program together in 1998. You don't want to hear my long history of how I became an astronaut, but to make it short, I applied 8 times. On the 8th time, I got an interview at NASA. The 7th time, I also got an interview at NASA. Didn't get selected that time. The 8th time, I got another interview. In my interview group was Leland Melvin. Leland played college football at the University of Richmond, was also a chemistry major, but played football there. Was such a good football player, he got drafted by the Detroit Lions when he graduated to be a wide receiver. Went to the Detroit Lions tryout, injured a hamstring, got cut by the Lions, got hired by the Dallas Cowboys. They tried him out. He was looking pretty good. Re-injured the same hamstring. At that point, the doctor said, Leland, you kind of got a continuous problem here. We don't think you're going to make it as a pro football player. So he said, well, I got a chemistry degree. I think I'll go work for NASA. So he came to work for NASA for a while. And after working for NASA for about 12 years or so, he decides to apply to the astronaut program. So he was in my astronaut interview group, his very first application, my 8th, and we both got selected. So I don't really like Leland that well. But you know, I always tell, what a great story. You know, if I can't be an NFL football player, I'll be an astronaut. You know, that's my backup plan. Yours truly back here. Over on this side, Randy Bresnick. Randy actually could have done what Butch did on this mission, because Randy's another Marine fighter pilot, trained as a shuttle pilot. Could have done like I said, what Butch did, put the landing gear down at the end of the mission. But we found out during Randy's training, Randy joined NASA in 2004. We found out early in his training that he would be a good spacewalker. We got ways of training all astronauts to do spacewalking, and some of them do better in the training than others. Randy did really well, so the powers that be said, hey Randy, we're going to put you on this mission as a spacewalker, and sorry, we're not going to use your skills. We've been training you to be a shuttle pilot. But he said, that's fine, I'd rather do spacewalks anyway. And so he ended up on this mission as our flight engineer, which meant he sat between Scorch and Butch up on the flight deck, helped them fly the space shuttle to space, telling them what to do and so forth. And then he ended up doing a couple of spacewalks during the mission. And then I saved this guy last but not least, Dr. Bobby Sachar, by far the most talented guy on this mission. Bobby Sachar is an orthopedic surgeon by training, decided to apply to the astronaut program, got selected to be an astronaut, again, in the same class as Randy. They both came in 2004. And Bobby Sachar, I say the most talented guy because when I first met him, I knew he was a medical doctor. Early in his career at NASA, I met him and I said, so Bobby, where'd you go for your undergraduate degree? And he said, I went to MIT. And I said, that's great, good school, but I don't think of MIT as a lot of doctors going there for their undergrad, because MIT is kind of a hard sciences school, right? And he said, well, my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering. I said, oh, I got it now, okay. Where'd you get your MD? He said, Harvard. I said, oh, okay, so you're kind of a slacker. Anyway, I say he's the most talented guy, and there's another story that goes along with this. I told you my mother lives in Wadsworth. All my life as a kid, my mother worked as a nurse, and when I was very young, my mother told me she wanted me to grow up and go to MIT and become a doctor. And I'm not sure why she put those two together. I have to assume, I've never asked her this directly because I like telling the story my way, and if she tells me something different, I'd have to change my story. But I assume that she worked with a doctor somewhere in her career who impressed her so much that she wanted her son to be a doctor, and maybe this guy had gone to MIT and she thought that's the path. So anyway, I say my mother's favorite astronaut on STS-129 is Bobby Sachar, because he went to MIT and became a doctor. So now for a little technology shift here. Stand by, Brian, because you may be up here in a second. Let me see, I'll escape out of this. Are you impressed yet? I'm going to go to the video, push that button. The video is over here. Whoa, this might work. People always ask me, was I ever scared? And I say, well, not on the launch pad, but when I try to get the video to work, I'm never sure. Is that full screen? Do you want to dim the lights a little? That might, I don't know how quickly that can happen. But so this is our mission patch. You see the same patch on my sleeve here from STS-129. This is the Space Shuttle Atlantis out on the launch pad. This is the morning of launch. We're getting all suited up there in our orange suits, ready to go. Come out of the building. Some people will applaud anything. We get into this motorhome. Motorhome takes us out to the launch pad. It's a very quiet place out there. Nobody wants to be anywhere near this rocket. It's full of rocket fuel, you know. Nobody else is within 3 miles of the launch pad except us. And you'll see these 6 guys in these white suits here that are there to help us get strapped in. This is Scorch, that's our commander. He gets strapped in first. Butch, our pilot, he goes in second. Me, back there, I go in, well, I guess I went in second. Leland, Bobby Sachar, and then our flight engineer, Randy Bresnick. His wife was about 9 months pregnant, so we had to give him a little consideration, let him blow a little kiss there.
Suppression warning system activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
This is a pretty wild ride. You got a 3.5 million pound vehicle with 7.5 million pounds of thrust. So when these solid rocket boosters light off, you know you're going somewhere. You just hope it's not Disney World. Solid rocket boosters work for about 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then they come off. During the shuttle days, we would reuse those solid rocket boosters. They'd come back, and we'd continue to space on the shuttle's main engines. 8.5 minutes later, we're in space. Get out the camera. You see Butch there, Scorch. You see Leland and Randy there in the background. There's somebody's helmet pad floating there, and we had to circularize our orbit with some thrusters. When those thrusters kicked on, you see that pad come flying back. Randy made a nice catch. Leland down on the middeck, getting out of his space launch suit there. Takes us about 6 hours to convert this rocket into a spaceship, and this is me under some equipment there. I like to look good, so I'm cleaning up there, camera ready. And this is the International Space Station, our destination. It starts out like a real bright star when we first see it, and as we get closer and closer, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Once we're right next to it, it dwarfs the space shuttle. It's huge. You see, we had about 28,000 pounds of cargo that we took to the space station in the back of this payload of Atlantis there. Did this backflip maneuver so that astronauts on the station could take a picture of all these black tiles, make sure we didn't have any damage. Both of these vehicles are traveling 17,500 miles an hour, but we come together very slowly. And you can listen in on the kind of the teamwork involved in getting us docked to the space station.
When I saw them both.
Ready with the camera? Ready. You got that? Coasting in. 18 inches. 9 inches. Ready, 2 inches. Fire. It's the initial contact got captured. Captured. Station recently advanced, captured, confirmed.
No free drift yet. Still steady line.
So we get docked to the space station, we open the hatches, float inside. There were 6 astronauts and cosmonauts on the space station, some of whom we hadn't seen for 6 months, so it was like a mini reunion there. This is Butch, our pilot, giving us a little tour of the space station. He's starting on the back end of the space station where the Russian segment is, taking us through their compartments and showing us the Soyuz vehicles attached and things like that, different compartments at their end of the space station. Going forward, this is kind of where they keep all their junk. So the US airlock where we were getting ready for the first spacewalk, that's a Belgian astronaut. That was Frank de Winne that just floated past. This is the US laboratory that we're in right now. This is Canadian astronaut Bob Thirsk. And here to the right is the European laboratory, to the left, Japanese laboratory. And we're going to float down through this tunnel, try not to get claustrophobic, and we'll end up on the middeck of Atlantis again. The cameraman's not even sure which way is up. There's our commander, Scorch. Never see our commander doing any work. He's just, should call him Gator. All he does is float and eat. You can see the space station outside attached to us. So Randy and I are getting the suits ready for the first spacewalk. We did 3 spacewalks during this mission. Here we are in the airlock. That's Bobby Sachar. That's me. Butch and Nicole Stott from the space station crew are inside the airlock with us, helping us get into the suits. You want to make sure you get that suit on right before you go out into the vacuum of space. You can tell I'm ready to go. Float outside, beautiful views from outside the space station. Pretty blue earth down below, different colors of the space station. This is me in the payload bay of Atlantis. And I don't know if you can read this. It says, "Go Navy, beat Army." You can ask me where I went to school. Brian told you a little while ago. So I'm unbolting this antenna. Bobby Sachar's on the end of the robotic arm. The robotic arm's coming over, bringing Bobby over. And once he gets close enough, I'm going to hand him this antenna. He took about 376 pictures with his still camera, though. That was like a record. And Butch and Leland are inside. They're driving Bobby around on that robotic arm. This is from Bobby's helmet camera, so you can see me. I hand the antenna to him. And I crawled over and met him on the space station side, and we attached this thing to the outside of space station. Reflection of Bobby there. Randy was inside. He was sort of the quarterback for the spacewalk. He was the one reading the procedures to us, making sure we stayed on our timeline, telling us what tool settings we needed, reminding us where we were going next, that sort of thing. I told you Bobby was an orthopedic surgeon. We put some of his skills to use, I guess, having him work on a lot of the robotic arms on the space station, make sure they were in good working order. And you see he's got a pretty good view of the Earth as they move him from one work site to another. Taking him over, this is the Japanese robotic arm over here. And he said that grease gun he's working with right there, he could use that on your knee, you know, anything. Fix your knee right up. Again, here's Leland and Butch watching Bobby's helmet camera. A couple days later, Randy and I went out on the second spacewalk, so we're in there, we're getting ready for the second spacewalk. And again, Butch is in there, you can't get dressed by yourself. Butch and Nicole are helping us get the suits on, and there's one of us there peeking around the corner. One of our tasks was to move this antenna from one side of the space station to the other. Another piece of equipment that came up on a later shuttle mission was going to plug in right there, so they asked us to take this antenna down, unplug it, unbolt it, carry it over to the other side of the space station and replug it in over there. So that's what we were doing. This is from my helmet camera. I'm looking at Randy's suit. That's his safety tether there floating in front of him. This is somebody waving to us from inside the space shuttle. We call these spacewalks, but you don't really use your legs doing a spacewalk at the International Space Station. You're just floating outside of this big space station. So it's like a big monkey bar set, and you're climbing on for 6.5 or 7 hours. We don't really move this fast because we don't want to fall off. It's 250 miles down. So we kind of sped the video up here to make it fit in the time allotted. This is the airlock. We come back in. This is kind of funny. My crewmates would always give me a hard time on how hard it was to get me out of this suit. Butch has to unbuckle it at the waist and then stand on my legs, hold my sleeves up, and push me down out of this thing. I have to keep reminding those guys that I got big biceps and they get caught in the sleeves. Hurts my shoulder just watching this. Because of getting in and out of that suit so many times, I have to have my left shoulder replaced here in a couple months. I don't know if you saw that. That's probably why Leland's not playing pro football. Hits like that. We brought Nicole Stott back with her. We had a spare seat. It was her turn to come home from space station, so that was the space station crew pushing her over to us. And this is us undocking.
TCS is good.
That was clear, I got LBLH.
This is kind of an advanced astronaut trick. You know, we make these spheres of water, you know, in the space station, space shuttle, and Leland added some M&Ms. If we had some of those Swedish fish candies, you ever heard of those? Could have made a little aquarium, but we didn't have any of those. Now I see Leland dropping his checklist. It's starting to fall. We're starting to feel a little gravity. This is what the commander and pilot see when they're getting ready to land. It's a beautiful day in Kennedy Space Center in Florida. When we came back, Butch hasn't pushed the button yet because the wheels aren't down yet. Here comes the wheels right now, very last minute. If the wheels don't come down, you're going to land anyway. It's just a big glider. It's going to stop a lot quicker without wheels. But you see this thermal image, how white hot the vehicle still is after reentry. And even though that runway at the Kennedy Space Center is 3 miles long, which is a really long runway, we would still use this drag chute to help us stop. So that was a quick home movie from STS-129. 11 days in space, 171 orbits around the Earth, and about 4.5 million miles. Thank you. So I'm going to try to close out of this, get back into my slideshow. Let's see here, slideshow. I guess from the beginning. Okay. So that was that. That's these guys. Here's where we watched the STS-129 mission video, checking things off in your seats. So Michelle asked me if maybe I could talk a little bit about the state of the U.S. space program. Currently, we have the International Space Station up there. The space station will be up there probably till the late 2020s, I'm betting. I think we're committed to funding our portion of it till 2024. It'll probably be extended beyond that. Right now, it's capable of housing 6 astronauts, and we have 2 Americans up there right now, 3 Russians and 1 Italian. So that's the normal contingent. Here in a couple months, Scott Kelly will launch up there. Scott Kelly is a U.S. astronaut. Is going to stay up there for a year. The normal tour of duty on space station is 6 months right now, but Scott Kelly and his Russian cohort are going to stay for a year. So we're going to get some data points on living in space longer than 6 months. We have a lot of data points now on people spending 6 months at a time up there, but longer than that, we have fewer data points. We don't have any American data points on that. Russians have some data points on people spending more than a year, actually. But so there's some science involved in sending Scott up for a year. And I'll get into some of the science that we're doing up there here in a minute in some later slides. But that's going great. You know, I think we're living and learning to live and work in space. We're cooperating with all the countries that are involved in the International Space Station. It's a great kind of United Nations almost venture up there. Near future, we have a commercial crew program in this country. Commercial crew program is to bring another U.S. rocket online so that we have a rocket with the U.S. flag. Currently, astronauts to get to the space station ride on the Russian rocket. We pay the Russians on the order of $70 million for a round-trip ride for one of our astronauts, so it's expensive. But they're the only game in town. They're the only vehicle that can get people to the space station right now. So we pay them. We're working with a couple of U.S. companies right now to develop new rockets, new capsules to take our astronauts to the space station. So you may have heard about this program. Boeing and SpaceX are the finalists in this program right now. We're hoping that in 2017, in about 2 years, we'll kick off the first manned flights on the commercial crew vehicles, one or the other, and start taking our astronauts up there to the space station. Possibly expand the crew complement to 7 maybe on space station. One of the considerations on how many people the space station can support is the environmental control system and how many humans can be supported by the oxygen, the purging of carbon dioxide, those kinds of things that need to go on space station. So maybe we can expand to 7. But anyway, in a couple of years, you'll hear more about commercial crew program. We'll have rockets launching with U.S. flags on them again, and we're looking forward to that. The more distant future, that's not the button I want. This word is launch. I know it's right there on the beautiful sunrise from space picture there, but Space Launch System, that's a bigger rocket that NASA is working on with the desire to sometime in the future send a mission to an asteroid, eventually to Mars. I'm sure that sometime in the future we'll eventually send people to Mars. That's our goal. And that's Space Launch System. That's SLS, if you hear about that. Let me talk to you a little bit about some of the impacts on everyday life that happen because of our working in space in some of the fields, medicine, science, engineering. This is a pretty cool one because I was part of this team. This is Randy Bresnick, who you just saw getting ready to go out on the spacewalk where we did this. So I was his partner out there. And I'm not sure who took the picture. I don't think I took this. I think this came from inside. But we installed this, oh shoot, Mike, training. We installed this antenna right here. This is an antenna that tracks shipping around the Earth. So there's actually a couple of antennas. Some are on satellites, one is on the space station. And they track, it's called the Vessel ID program. They track shipping. It's sort of like air traffic control for ships. So this system can track 400,000 ship targets from 22,000 different ships in a day. So it's basically keeping track of where all the shipping is going and coming, and makes shipping a little safer. See the next one. This farming from space, we have a camera that's pointed at the Earth called the Iss Agricultural Camera. And using that camera, there's a consortium headed by the University of North Dakota that controls this camera. Farmers can look at pictures from this camera and determine where crops are having fertility issues or maybe disease problems, and they can see these problems earlier than they can detect standing right next to the crop. So it's making farming better, more productive, yields higher. It's kind of an interesting thing. There's Leland again, playing with water. The space station recycles water. So urine on the space station, captured humidity, sweat, all get recycled up there because water on the space station is at a premium. We can't make water on the space station. We have to have it delivered when we run out. So we recycle as much as we can. Using some of that technology, we've been able to bring that to Earth, adapt it to situations where maybe a remote area or an area devastated by a natural disaster needs some kind of water treatment system. And this is actually a water treatment system in Chiapas, Mexico, right here, that was adapted from this technology. This is a filtration plant that was put up in Pakistan after an earthquake using the same technology that we're using on space station. So a lot of adaptations for this technology here on Earth. This is pretty cool. Protein crystal growth. This is Nicole Stott, who you saw helping me get into my spacesuit there. This is while she was on the space station. She did some protein crystal growth experiments. Now this in the upper left, this is a protein crystal grown here on Earth. This is the same protein crystal grown in space. So you can see without gravity, these crystals grow a lot better in space. Bigger, more perfect crystals can be grown in space. This crystal actually, and I can't pronounce it, happens to be a contributor to muscular dystrophy in the human body. Human body has over 100,000 proteins in it, and this particular one contributes to muscular dystrophy. So what scientists here, researchers on the ground, have figured out that there's an inhibitor that they can put into the body that will attach itself to this protein crystal and slow down that process where people contract muscular dystrophy. So what they learned, the cool thing about this is that, and this is the protein crystal with this inhibitor kind of attached here. By growing this pair, the protein crystal and the inhibitor in space, they grew a more perfect crystal, a larger combination of the two, and they found out there's actually a water molecule in that protein that they didn't know about because they never saw it by growing the crystal down here on Earth. So now researchers are developing a better inhibitor to fight off this disease because they know now there's actually a water molecule that they never knew about before. So I think that's one of the coolest things, and like I said, the name of the protein crystal is over my head. Doctor, you could probably come up here and school me later and tell me how to pronounce it, but I think it's just kind of cool that we can make better pharmaceuticals because of the things we learn in space. This is another friend of mine, Shane Kimbrough. He is working on a microbial vaccine development experiment on the space shuttle. This is actually in the mid-deck of the space shuttle. And this particular development is helping to make a vaccine for salmonella. So everybody's heard of salmonella, and obviously we'd like to have something to prevent that foodborne disease if we could. So because of some work on that in space, we're developing a new vaccine for salmonella. Okay, we saw in the video this robotic arm. Bobby was actually riding on the end of this robotic arm, and right now in this picture, it has another piece of it. This is called Dexter. Dexter is sort of a dexterous manipulator arm. It's kind of the hand that goes on the end of the robotic arm, and it has dexterity that it can actually manipulate bolts on the outside of the space station and do things like that. Well, from that technology, this robotic technology that we've put to use in space, people on Earth have developed a system that's called Neuro Arm. And Neuro Arm is a doctor-aided robotic system that they do brain surgery. No well-read. Brain surgery with. This is actually the first patient that they used this device on before and after her brain surgery. So that is pretty cool. And you know, they say that with the robotic, the neurosurgery aided by the robotics is better, more precise, and it's done inside an MRI machine. So they also had to develop this Neuro Arm, not using any metallic metals, because that would mess up the MRI machine. So this is a doctor from University of Calgary using this device, and again, here's the end of the robotic arm on the space station. Another thing that we've learned more recently on space station is that some of our astronauts come back with vision impairment, and we're not sure of the cause yet, but we're working on trying to find out. So we're doing a lot of research. This is Karen Nyberg up on space station. She's using this thing called a fundoscope, and she's taking some images of her eyeball, and so that people on the ground can figure out what's causing this shift in eyesight. It tends to show up in about 20% of our long duration astronauts, and by long duration I mean the people that go up for 6 months at a time. There's a few obvious possible contributors. Fluid shifts to your head in space for whatever reason. So you get a lot of fluid shift to your head. That could add to the interocular pressure, I guess. The CO2 content, carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere on space station is a little higher than down here on Earth, so that could also add to it. Diet's pretty stable, maybe a little bit high in sodium, so that could also be a contributor. So we're working on research to figure that out right now. This is Kevin Ford. He's working out on advanced resistive exercise device on space station. We've figured out that to fight off osteoporosis-like symptoms in bones, so our astronauts would lose bone density if they didn't do this, if they didn't exercise. So our astronauts on the space station spend about 2.5 hours a day exercising every day to make sure that they keep that muscle tight, those muscles tight to put tension on the bones, keep the bones rebuilding themselves just as strong as they were in the first place. Fluid behavior, this is Joe Akaba. He's doing some studies on fluid behavior, and without gravity, surface tension, like you saw in those spheres of water that Leland's playing with all the time. Whenever you see him, football player playing with the water sphere. Without gravity, surface tension is the dominant force that affects liquids in space. So we're learning a lot about how liquids behave, and from that we can design better tanks for fluids that are tanks that are going to space and things like that. Missy materials testing. This is Pat Forrester. This is a Missy experiment right here that he's playing with. This is a materials International Space Station experiment, Missy, and about 8 or 9 versions of Missy have gone up and come down from space station. Basically what they do is they take materials, put them in this experiment case, and put it outside for 6 or 9 months and see how these materials react in space, and then bring it back down to Earth and let the smart people take a look at it. But as you can see, there was a coating validated on this that now protects Mars Curiosity up on Mars. And we do a lot of education outreach from the space station. In the 14 years that we've had astronauts living on the space station, I think we've reached out to something like 42 million students, almost 3 million teachers, 22,000 schools in 44 countries. So a lot of education outreach, trying to relate to students, tell them what's going on, and hopefully inspire them to follow in our footsteps, because we need, as we age, we need more engineers and scientists and astronauts to come to NASA. So I think that's it. I wanted to put a plug in for the Glenn Visitor Center at the Great Lakes Science Center, which is pretty cool. I don't know if any of you are on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I tweet about what's going on in space and some of our other websites. So I think that's it. I'd like to open it up for questions. I know I kind of went longer than I was supposed to there. Thank you.
If you please, anyone who has questions, we invite you to come up to the microphone. We would ask you, to make direct questions that Mike can answer. Please come on up.
Questions Mike can answer, that's the key.
Mike can answer?
Yes.
Well, there's all of my buddies, I went to a nerd school, and all of my buddies there say that we should go to Mars rather than do these, what do you call it, interplanetary rocks that have useful chemicals in them. Are you of that opinion that we should go for Mars with a manned spaceflight?
I sure am. I'm not saying I'm in favor of Mars over a possible asteroid mission, because I think our president, our NASA administrator have kind of set that our mission goals are to go to an asteroid, go to Mars, and I'm not going to stand here and say that we should do something different than what they say. Okay, so I think there's a lot to be gained by going to an asteroid. We're learning all kinds of techniques now for how we would corral an asteroid and get some useful science out of it. It seems a lot like Buck Rogers, but I think we could pull it off. So.
Okay, one other ridiculous question. Have you considered putting some plants up there to get the carbon dioxide into oxygen again? And in doing that, have you considered marijuana?
Well, we've grown lettuce. We've grown some plants up there. It was funny because Steve Swanson, who just came back from the space station, he nursed a few lettuce plants through their growing cycle, and grew some nice looking lettuce. And you know what he did? He harvested the lettuce, and then he sent it back to Earth to be analyzed. He couldn't eat the lettuce yet because we don't know. Who knows what could happen? But do all that work and then have to send it home to have it inspected before you can eat it. Somebody else probably ate it. So.
Hi, Mike. 2 questions for you. One, do you have any aspirations to go back and be a long-duration astronaut on space station? And 2, I know Butch Wilmore's got a couple of spacewalks coming up in a couple weeks, and he hasn't done one yet. Any advice for Butch?
Well, the first question is, no, I'm not looking to go back to space. I feel like I've had my turns and been very fortunate to get to go the times that I did. The people that are training to do these 6-month missions right now have kind of a hard life, and they're traveling for 3 years. They're training for these 6-month missions, and most of that time is travel away from Houston. So it's away from the family. Butch has young daughters, and he was willing to do that. And you also have to learn Russian, and Russian's a hard language to learn. As long as we're still flying up on a Russian rocket, we need to be able to speak their language. The cosmonauts all speak pretty good English, but we know if the stuff hits the fan that they'll revert to their native tongue, and we want to understand what they're saying. So we have to learn Russian. So there's a lot of overhead and in wanting to go do that, and I'm fairly content to stay here on the ground and help people like Butch do what he's doing. And I think Butch will do great. We treated him just like a spacewalk crew member on STS-129. He was with us on most of our training. He got us in and out of those suits every time, and so I know that he's been around the suits, and he'll do a great job up there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him.
I've also got two questions. First of all, in terms of the long-distance space missions, if you're talking like going to Mars and in the future, what sort of unique challenges does that pose? And then, are there any specific upcoming technologies that show a lot of promise towards, getting you to that point, since that's obviously something that we want to work towards?
Well, I think, we could all sit here and talk about some of the challenges because it's a long mission right now. It's 6 months to get to Mars. You want to have some kind of a meaningful mission while you're at Mars, and then 6 months to get back. And so, some of the things we're talking about is how large a crew do you send? What is the crew makeup? You probably need a psychiatrist on the crew, when you're locking people up, and then you need a person that can treat the psychiatrist, So anyway, there's a lot of challenges there. First and foremost, maybe since I hit on the 6-month thing, maybe some propulsion improvements might help us. If we could get there faster, that would, of course, make things better. All things that we're working on, there's some materials developments that we're working on. Of course, you saw, probably everyone heard about Orion's test mission mostly to test some thermal protection system materials so that we hadn't had anything re-enter that fast since Apollo days, and so materials that can withstand the temperatures from that high speed of re-entry is also important. So things like that, but I think just thinking about it, the fact that you're going to be cooped up with those people for that long and not go crazy is going to be a major factor in how we. But those people that will represent the U.S. and that crew are probably in grade school right now. I don't know how far out it'll be, but maybe the 2030s if we can speed things up a little.
Thank you.
Sure.
The Chinese are working hard to land on the moon and establish a moon base. And I hear the Americans talking about going to Mars, but nothing really about the moon. And if the Chinese control the moon, is that going to light a fire under Congress to fund NASA a little better?
We'll see what happens when they start taking our flags down. Yeah, as I said before, the president's guidance right now is that we'll go to an asteroid and then we'll go to Mars. And so things change, but right now that's our plan. I can see plenty of arguments for going back to the moon because it's closer, and developing a base on the moon would be much easier than setting up something on Mars, which is 20 minutes away. You can't even ask a quick question from Mars. It takes 20 minutes for the voice transmission to get to Earth, and 20 minutes for the answer if mission control knows the answer right away. So you're talking like a 40-minute round trip to get an answer for your question. So it's a lot of problems with going to Mars. So we'll overcome them, but I can see your point, and going to the moon might be a stepping stone to doing that.
I'm interested in what kind of emotional response and mental reactions you had to your space visits, both during the mission and afterwards.
I have to say, I'm a spiritual guy, but seeing the Earth from 250 miles up just to me was a very almost emotional kind of thing. And I'm not an emotional guy, I tell you. But it was very, very impressive, awesome to me to see the Earth and to know that every person that you know and love and everything that you've ever learned, is down on that little blue marble down there. It's just, you have to believe in a higher power, I think, when you see that from there. It's just, I wish I could convey that stronger, better, more articulate, but it's impressive. Thanks for that question. I continue to feel the same way, strong feelings about that. And you also, if you're not kind of an environmentalist before you go to space, you're at least part of one when you come back, because when you see how fragile the Earth looks from space, and you see that very thin atmosphere that we have that protects us, you really quickly figure out that we really do need to take care of this spaceship that we're all riding on right now.
What would happen if one of you guys would develop an acute case of appendicitis or some kind of disease or something like that? And also, there's no germs up there, I'm assuming. So did anybody get the flu or any colds or any of that stuff?
Well, we try to keep diseases away from, we go into quarantine before we launch. We try to stay away from sick people as much as we can. Occasionally, something slips by us and a crew will end up with a couple of runny noses up there, and we'll try to figure out how those germs slipped past us. But we do a pretty good job for the most part because we don't see that very often. Acute appendicitis could happen, you know. Anything that needs rapid medical attention that we can't treat on the space station, we would send the crew home. They can jump in their Soyuz capsules and they can be on the Earth in 45 minutes. They might not be in the best spot on Earth in 45 minutes. but within a few hours, you can probably get to a pretty good spot on Earth.
Does everyone bring their own spacesuit up there, or are they all up there?
Everybody, you wear it up there, and then it's there until you come home in it.
There's like about 10 of them there, or you guys share?
No, we don't. The ones that are up there all belong to somebody up there. So Butch has his. The other people, they all have their spacesuits. They're all up there, ready for them to jump into if they needed to come home quick. No spares, because people don't show up without a spacesuit. So
Thanks for coming. Two technical ones. Are there any experiments now or planned that are looking at tectonic plate shifting to see if we can learn anything about what happens before or after an earthquake? And the other one is, since the Earth is protected by the Van Allen radiation belts, are they looking at trying to recreate one in miniature around spacecraft?
I don't know, and I don't know. Sorry. You know, I used to say, on questions that hard, I used to say, I'm sorry, I'm an aerospace engineer. And then they start asking me propulsion questions. And I'm like, I don't know that either. I'm a terrible aerospace engineer. So I'm sorry. I'm sure that somebody is probably looking at tectonic plate shifting from space, because it just seems like a natural fit that, you know, all the cameras that we have pointed at Earth, you would be able to learn something from that, just like farming from space, you know, a similar thing. You know, a German astronaut who just came back was a volcanologist, so I wonder, I'll have to ask him when I see him that question, so I'll know next time. Alex Gerst, so maybe search for him online and see if he's put out any information that he's learned on space station. Doctor, I saw that you were, you know, I met you a little while ago, Alana. I didn't know it was Dr. Cooper.
I can't do an appendectomy.
Neither can I.
I was impressed and surprised by the sort of broad array of the kinds of experiments and tests that are being done up there. And they seemed somewhat eclectic to me. I mean, from the farming imaging to the MS. And I'm wondering what kind of criteria are used to decide what sorts of testing will be done and how that process happens.
That's a good question. There is sort of a clearinghouse, cases, right, Mike? Yeah. You know about them. Sure. Our good friend Box Johnson. Yeah. God help us. CASES is an organization that sort of people can go to and say, I have an experiment I want to propose for space station, and their job is sort of to prioritize and help projects get to space station. And you know, it's kind of interesting because you think, well, they're doing an experiment and then they get the experiment back, and that's how the people on the ground figure out, you know, what happened in space. But we can't always bring these experiments back because we have plenty of cargo lift capability, taking things to the space station, but we don't have very much bringing things back. We have SpaceX is right now the only cargo vehicle that comes back intact. And so SpaceX capsules are always chock full of things that we need brought down, some experiments that experimenters want to look at, tweak, send back up maybe, you know, good cause for doing that in some experiments. But experiment has to be something that probably, somebody like me can operate in space. And, I'm not that smart, but I'm trainable. So I could maybe operate your experiment and then get the data for you and send it to you. But there are groups like CASIS that figure that out, prioritize. So yeah, there's whole scads. In fact, I want to look at this because we have a meeting every Monday morning this week because of the holiday. We had it yesterday morning. And every Monday morning, somebody comes up and gives us a short brief on what's going on the space station and what happened last week, what's happening this week. And one of the things they talk about is the experiments, okay? So I was sitting there, and I'm going to take a chance at reading some of these things because I don't know what most of them are. So I'm just going to give you a flavor for all the different acronyms and things that are going on. So last week they did approximately 50 hours of science experiment work, which is pretty good. We shoot for 40. And between, typically we have 3 astronauts on the US side. That includes the Japanese lab, the European lab, the US lab. So we have 2 Americans and an Italian working on those 3 laboratories right now. And together they were able to do 50 hours of science along with taking care of the space station and exercising, all the other things. So I'm going to just read a list. Polar transfer, Micro 5 microgravity science, glove box, which was working worms and salmonella, T-cell activation, binary colloidal alloy test, JAXA protein crystal growth, fruit fly lab, advanced plant experiments, biological research in canisters 20. So there have been like 19 of those before probably. And that's just the ones I could quickly type out while they were going through this huge list. So there's always a ton of science going on up there at one time. And experiments don't all take a lot of time. Some of them are there for 6 months and they take maybe an hour a week, and some are more involved. But just to give you a flavor for all the stuff that's going on up there, I tried to in my slides, but just to kind of share with you a few other things that I can't answer questions about. Sorry. One more question?
I think this is one you really can answer because it has to do with size. I'm really not sure how big the space station is. Would it fit in this room?
The habitable compartments would definitely fit in this room. If we put them all together, the habitable part of the space station is like a 5-bedroom house. And the thing about the space station is that, you think of your 5-bedroom house and you got so much floor space to walk around in and you kind of get a feel for, but you have to imagine in the space station, you can float and you can somebody can be floating, up above you. I mean, the thing is not as high as this ceiling. It's essentially about, the inside walls are maybe 10 by 10 feet, up across. So that's the volume. But you could get lost in the space station just about. When I was up there for the 2 times I was up there were days I would go without seeing some of my crewmates because they would be working in a different part of the Russian cosmonauts, for example. Yuri Malenchenko was one of the cosmonauts up there on my first mission. I would go a couple days without ever seeing Yuri. And then whenever I saw him, it looked like he just got up from a nap. So I thought, well, these space station guys have it a little better than us. They're actually able to take a nap during the middle of the day. And shuttle astronauts, we had to work every minute of every day. We didn't have that many days to get our work done. So a 5-bedroom house, if you think about that. So that's about the size.
Thank you.
Sure. Great questions. Thank you very much.
So once again, thank you, Mike, for everything you do for all of us, but certainly for joining us tonight. There are some refreshments in the back, and in the back we have a table set where Mike will sign autographs as well. So thank you because I wasn't reading your handwriting. And please, any questions about our program, don't hesitate to contact the office, and I hope we will see you again in the Siegal Lifelong Learning Program. Thanks so much.